Welcome, everybody. This is the Puna Lunch Club. I'm here with Sager the Rager and Vienna Rai. Today, we're going to talk about great things, all things great. But on a serious note, all right, would you guys like to introduce yourselves?
I'll respond to the questions.
We should just do a quick disclaimer. We are all related.
We're related. So this is like family therapy, kind of.
Yup.
Not really. I'm not sure there's anything therapeutic about it.
Okay. My name is Sage Takehiro. I am a professional learner. I've worked in education for 23 years. I'm an expert in a lot of things, and there's a lot of things that I am super not an expert in. So yeah,
Can we start with the fact that it's President's Day?
it's President's Day.
And I'm curious how Sager the Rager feels about U.S. presidents.
Well, I think that some of them were really good and interesting people, and some of them, had opposing interests. When I was in third grade, I wanted to be the president of the United States. And when I got my bachelor's degree in political science, I realized that the president is basically just the guy who gets paid to be blamed for everything that goes wrong. So I decided that I didn't want to do that. But yeah, presidents,
Do you identify as American?
not by choice. If I travel internationally, of course, my passport's going to be a US passport. There's no getting around that. But culturally, I can't say that I 100% identify as an American. I think there's a lot of things about American culture that has been influential in Hawaii and in myself and in my identity. Mostly like Black American culture. I grew up in the hip hop era, which was probably one of the most significant aspects of American culture to date, I want to say. So, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't claim that history as my own, but it's definitely something that I subscribe to,
Snoop Dogg for president?
of course.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Snoop Dogg for anything. I'll take Snoop Dogg as my bus driver. I'll take Snoop Dogg as my
Well, that's racist.
roommate.
Snoop
I'll
Dogg
take
is my
Snoop Dogg
bus
as
driver.
my teacher.
Thank God we have a white man here to
You know what? If Snoop
know.
if Snoop Dogg
To keep
was
this racially correct.
if Snoop Dogg was your bus driver, there would be smoke seeping out of the windows.
The kids would be all
The
high.
sounds would be bumping. And you never know what kind of learning experience you're going to get.
So what does the future look like in the education system here in Hawaii?
The future of the education system in Hawaii is going to be a lot more project based. Education is always going to change. That's the only thing that's constant in education is times change, industries change, societies change, landscapes change. And so education will always have to evolve according to what the needs are for a society at a given time. So now our needs are independent thinkers, problem solvers. Every generation has their own educational agenda. I think the educational agenda for this generation is to raise independent thinkers and people who can create their own opportunities, solve their own problems without somebody holding their hand to do it. A lot of that in the education system, what that looks like is having teachers who are focused on maybe not so much teaching that something is right or wrong, but focusing more on the process and how you arrive at a conclusion, and also providing a safe space for learners to feel comfortable and confident making mistakes. I think traditionally, especially coming from an Asian family where, if you don't have an A, you're not a topic of conversation. I've been in that family dynamic where I'm the youngest, my older sisters get 4.0s, and then when it comes to talking about my grades, the subject gets changed real quick. Talk about something else. So every generation, especially for immigrants who are trying to make a difference, the focus on the grade is really important. But I think that the future of education is going to focus less on grades and more on competencies, like abilities, skills, and the ability to learn things on their own. Yeah.
So much mana'o. Amazing.
That's where I think the future of education is going. If it doesn't go there, let me tell you something about this generation. If it doesn't go there, they're going to take it there.
Word.
With or without help, they're going to take it there. So, yeah, it's an interesting place to be. Education's on, I think what is, when Max was saying that teachers are underestimated and underpaid, I think that is 120% true when we look at first responders, policemen, firemen, doctors, people in the healthcare industry. We think of them as first responders. We think of them as the people who show up and put fires out and heal people. But if you're looking at children and adolescents, the first responders for that demographic are teachers. If a student is struggling with their physical, mental, social, emotional health, if they're experiencing substance abuse, sexual abuse, domestic abuse, the first responder is the teacher or their counselor or an administrator or a coach or whatever staff happens to be on duty at the time that an incident occurs.
It sounds like it's time for you to be a first responder. So what kind of opportunities are there in the community for young people? Or like, what do you see as a teacher? You have juniors and seniors who are about to graduate. In our local community here, what kind of opportunities do they see for themselves?
So internships are definitely one. If an internship is not available to you, you just have to know your interests and go to those places and build relationships. So I think what we're talking about is has everything to do with prior to high school or prior to graduating from high school. Because if a young adult is not trained to recognize opportunities, if they're not trained, they're not leaving high school with the confidence to pursue their interests and the skills that it takes in order to create opportunities, then they're not going to know how to access or even recognize those opportunities. I think the problem with education in years past is that it's been a colonial tool to control people. And so when they leave high school, they're still in this mindset of tell me what to do. And so they're not used to having to recognize opportunities for themselves. even if they did recognize an opportunity, do they have the skill to communicate? Do they have the skill to network? Do they have the resources to do those things? Do they know how to create the resources or access the resources? So, high school, elementary school, like grade school, is very important because you're looking at the first 18 years of a human being's life. You can't expect them to turn 18 and know how to do those things if you have not been conditioning them to be in that mind space since early childhood.
Nice.
So for a young adult,
So you think they learn about opportunity and how to network and all these things and be prepared for that? You think they learn that at school?
they can. I think some schools have opportunities for students to learn that if the student is willing to take those opportunities into consideration. The sad thing is, our family structures and our family economic systems, a lot of kids who are in high school, they, even though they have access to those opportunities, a lot of them work to support themselves and their families, which is really sad. A high school student should not have to be at work till midnight on a school night to feed themselves. There's a lot of high school age kids who are struggling economically, who don't have parents who can provide for them, who are too busy providing for themselves to even be able to take advantage of any of the opportunities that they might have at their school or in their community. So that's a big issue, is that the economic depression, we think about mostly how it impacts adults. How are we thinking about how economic depression impacts kids and their learning experience and their ability to enter the world as an adult with the skills that they need?
Yeah, for sure. The kids are definitely the next generation, the most important resource, and we should be doing all that we can to try to change their experience and their opportunities. So, with all the progress and the development happening, what are some ways that we can balance the two? Like, how can we progress into the future and balance the culture and the preservation while still experiencing the development, which is inevitable?
In terms of development, let's say real estate development, for example.
I mean, development in general, like there's more people, you need more infrastructure, there's just development in all areas, like development of resources, development of opportunities. I'm not just talking about real estate development.
In order to develop anything, you have to know what you're working with. You have to know what you're trying to develop and the canvas or the platform that you have to develop it on. Let's just talk about land in Hawaii, developing land in Hawaii. One way that the Hawaiian culture can inform the development of land in Hawaii is by going back to understanding the original place names and the names of the natural elements and phenomenon that occurs in these spaces. So education is one thing that, because the Hawaiian language, was banned and we had to struggle to revive it, a lot of people who came here to develop were not incorporating traditional Hawaiian names in their development. Today you have Hawaii Volcanoes National Park. You have all these places who are trying to bring back the traditional names of places, because in those names, the names are databases, basically. So let's just say you build houses, right? and you're a credible house builder because you have how many years of experience building houses?
10.
So you have a decade experience building houses. So you're going to be more credible. Your knowledge base is going to be more credible than the person who just started building houses, right? So now let's look at it. The native Hawaiians have been living here for thousands of years, hundreds of generations. And so their observations of this space should be more credible than the person who just got here, right? Because we have more experience on this landscape. We have more experience in this environment. And all of those experiences were coded in the names that those original observers gave to these places, the rivers, the rains, the winds, the surf breaks. And all those names are based on the characteristics, the timing, and the interactions of those natural environments and elements. So what happens when you ban the Hawaiian language and when you discredit Hawaiian culture is now you're debasing or decentralizing the most credible information that there is about this place. So let's take Hawaiian Paradise Park, for example. You establish this old sugar industry can no longer do agriculture because of the burning and all of the things they did to process sugar. So a lot of those agricultural lands that are no longer good for certain agricultural things turn into real estate developments, right? And of course, you're talking about increase in population, and so there's a need for housing. So you're going to advertise this space as Hawaiian Paradise Park. So the haole living someplace else is going to be like, oh yeah, that's affordable land. So the haole living from somewhere else is going to purchase an affordable property in this place called Hawaiian Paradise Park. And that gives the vibe that they're coming to paradise, right? This utopic image of their space. And then when they get here, it's, muggy and hot and wet and everything mildews. And they're like, oh, what's up with all this rain, But the traditional name for this place is Waikahe Nui. Waikahe Nui. So when we don't understand the language, we don't understand what that means. Vai is water. Kahe is to flow. In Hawaiian language, the more you repeat something, repetition gives mana, gives energy. So if something is repeated, that means there's just more of it. So vai kahe, flow, means that the baga is flowing, plenty. And then you slap a nui on top of that. The baga is flowing nui, big. There's a big flow of water. So to understand your space, you have to understand that if you're coming to this place, it's not Hawaiian Paradise Park. It's a place where there is a very heavy flow of water. Very heavy flow of water. You have to understand that with water comes erosion, comes flooding, comes all kind of things. So to answer your question about how can we use what? How can we use traditional Hawaiian knowledge, like the language, for example, to inform development? Well, it starts with the aina. It starts with the names of the aina. It starts with the names of the akua, the elements associated with the aina. And to me, that's where it has to start.
How many developers in Puna you think actually know about the area they're developing in?
I don't know. It would be interesting to find out. Not all developers are as transparent as you are. Not all developers are on social media with a growing number of followers saying, "Hey, check me out. This is what I'm doing." For one, probably because they're just building houses is very stressful work. I know from observing you, they probably just don't have the time or the
Because
energy,
they don't have a VNRI.
or they don't have a Vienna. They don't have a cousin who, you know, has been winning filmmaking awards since she was in high school.
This is real talk. There's no way I'm social mediating myself.
Yeah, there's not a lot of developers who are very transparent about their work, and so it's hard to track, who is developing and what they're doing and how they're doing it. So yeah, I don't know how many developers know that. I don't know how many developers think that they need to know that.
Maybe, yeah. Maybe that's part of the issue, yeah.
But going back to education, raising our children in a Hawaiian language immersion is going to, they won't have a choice. They'll the way they see the world is going to be from a Hawaiian perspective.
Hey, yo.
So developers, there's a lot of local developers who grew up here, but the education system at the time that they were going to school is not what it is today. They were not allowed to, be as culturally immersed as our kids are today. And so I think when we look at the future of education, a lot of institutions are starting to realize that, and starting to have more of a cultural foundation. So the kids who are growing up today, it'll be automatic for them, to look at a landscape and to look at it from a Hawaiian perspective will be automatic.
So what do you think developing from a Hawaiian perspective looks like? Like, you come in, you learn about the place, you learn about the names, you learn about the history, and from there you base how you develop.
Well, I think that I don't even know myself, to be honest, because I'm not a developer. And I think like a lot of Hawaiians, well, I can really only speak for myself as a Hawaiian. I think for myself as a Hawaiian, I've never wanted to learn about development because I've never respected it, because it was one of those factors of colonization that displaced so many Hawaiian families. And so there's a certain generational trauma, there's a certain distaste for colonial things that make myself, for example, or maybe Hawaiians like me, not want to be in that mental space because it's emotional for us.
As much as you're not pro-development or your view is different.
I don't think it's about not being pro-development. I think, again, it goes back to childhood and experience. And I wasn't raised, like our kids are raised on construction sites. I was not raised on a construction site. I was raised in the Pele Defense Office. I was raised by my dad, who was fighting against all these developments on the front lines with, Pali Kapu and, all these other Hawaiians from our island and other islands who were basically on the forefronts of the Hawaiian civil rights movement. And so I was raised with the idea that development was harmful for our aina.
So from that perspective of how to develop from a Hawaiian perspective, it's just no development?
I think it has to be, I think at the time, it was no development. For that generation, it was no development because the development that was happening at the time was extremely harmful for the natural environment. You're talking about, these are the guys who reclaimed Kaho'olawe. You're talking about cracking an island to its core so that it cannot even retain water. It cannot even have an aquifer because of their practice bombs. Those practice bombs are still happening at Pohakuloa today. So when you look at development, it's like there's been so many harmful developments that continue to this day and that don't even attempt to truly reconcile or truly live within the means. So the Hawaiian perspective, I'm not saying the Hawaiian perspective is 100% right in every situation. I think the Hawaiian perspective needs to evolve. But traditionally, the traditional Hawaiian perspective is, one, never show up empty-handed. Two, leave a place cleaner than it was when you got there. And three, never take more than what you need.
Do you think all Hawaiians practice this perspective?
Not anymore. And it depends on the generation. So I think one thing people really need to understand when they talk about Hawaiians, every generation has a different experience. So you have to be very specific about what generation of Hawaiian you're referring to.
Which generation of Hawaiian are you referring to?
Well, I'm talking about my generation and the generation that I'm familiar with. I think every generation has a different experience. So when you ask me the question, what generation are you talking about? Are you talking about a specific generation?
Well, I think also like when you talk about development, it has to be kind of connected with a people's sovereignty, right? Because it's who's developing and for what purpose.
Exactly. And the thing about, it's not that Hawaiians were anti-development. Hawaiians were very strategic about their development as it related to the natural environment. So the Hawaiian always took the natural environment into consideration when a lot of their developments are based on the natural environment and what goes on in the natural environment and the things that naturally occur in that space. Whereas because that value or that mentality has been decentralized by our colonial education system, by our colonial existence, then a lot of times when we go into development today, we totally do not think about developing a space in relation to the natural environment. And that's what I think the difference is. The Hawaiian perspective isn't going to do anything without taking into consideration the kama'aina of a space. And the kama'aina of a space isn't just the people, it's the vegetation. It's the water, the forms of water, the movement of water, the life cycles, and the timing of the life cycles. Those are all the things that I think a Hawaiian perspective would take into consideration with anything, with any kind of development or with any kind of situation. Even when we name our children, we look outside and we look to the weather systems to inform us about, what that child is going to be. And the reason why is because the Hawaiian understands that water is everything. So the water that feeds a particular landscape or the water that feeds a tree in that landscape is going to be the same water that gives their body life. So you are related to the trees, you are related to the landscape, because the light, the heat, the energy from the universe, the water, it's all being transpired and shared between the human being and their natural environment. And I think that when we decentralize Hawaiian thinking, we lose that very basic, fundamental idea. So rather than having our existence in balance with nature drive our development, instead our development is driven by other factors, such as making a profit. And a lot of local people, are not the ones who profit from these developments.
Do you think that the development provides a lot of jobs for local people?
Right. So yes, jobs. But if you're talking about opportunity, is a job the kind of opportunity that you want for your kid? Do you want your child's opportunity to be limited to a job?
Well, I mean, you mentioned that hiring people is a liability. Well, without having a job and experience to build skills, you kind of are limited. Like, you're not just going to go out into the world and just it's going to fall into your lap.
Absolutely.
You're going to have to get a job. A lot of nowadays people apply for jobs, they don't have a car, they don't have a driver's license, they don't have any tools, and they have no experience, and they want you to pay them as if you're paying somebody who has 10-15 years of experience, who has a vehicle, who has all their own tools needed, whether that's for a construction job, a media job. I'm talking about tools in general. Knowledge can be a tool. A lot of people who apply for jobs nowadays are lacking altogether. So, I mean, do I want my kids to have a job? I think that the answer to that is I don't want them to have a W-2 job, but they need to build skills before they can expect more than that.
I definitely think that jobs are one kind of opportunity. I learned more on a job than I ever learned in school. So yes, I think people need jobs. We live in a world where you need money. So yes, you need an income somehow. But let's think about the word opportunity. Opportunity can be so broad, right? Are you looking at the opportunity to generate income? Are you looking at the opportunity to sustain yourself? And does sustenance only come from having a paid income? Can sustenance come from having land to farm on, having access to an ocean to get fish from? Can those be opportunities?
Sure, of course, anything can be an opportunity, but I think it's really hard in the modern day world, which is sad in a way, but it's really hard to exist without some form of monetary gain. So, I mean, having land and having access and all these things, I think that would be great if you could somehow survive on that without having to pay property tax, without having to put gas in your car to get to these places, or having to buy a car in general. But I guess with the modern day, that's just kind of part of life, right? So what kind of opportunities would there be without the tourism? So let's say there was no tourism and no construction, no development. What kind of opportunities would we have?
I think that's just unrealistic. I think not having tourism is unrealistic for any society because travel now, it's like anybody can go anywhere. So whether there is tourism here or whether there is tourism in Greece or Amsterdam or anywhere else in the world, so long as there are airplanes, there will be tourism. And that can be a great thing, but how we manage
But I mean,
those
what I'm
industries.
trying to say is, how do we become more self-sustainable? Like, what kind of opportunities can be created, or what kind of jobs can be created? What kind of income streams can we create so that we're not so dependent on these forms of income?
So I think that's another misunderstanding about Hawaiian culture is self-sustainability. The Hawaiian from the beginning of time knew that they were not able to self-sustain, and that's why community and relationships were the foundation of Hawaiian culture and Hawaiian life and existence. The ohana system, the family system. The Hawaiian knew that it takes more than one person to survive. And so I think that saying self sustainability kind of is taking us in the wrong direction. I think sustainability, definitely, but now the world, because of globalization, and I'm going to go so far as to say interglobalization. What does that mean? That means that now we're looking at interplanetary existence, right? So
It's like I know where this is going.
when interrelationships are the foundation for human survival. Period. That's it. I think that thinking about being self-sustainable, if we expect our people to be 100% self-sufficient just based on the resources that we have in Hawaii, well, that's not a realistic goal. I think that building international relationships is critical. Understanding the global economy, understanding things like finance. So right now, there's financial literacy is like a really big thing. And I know a lot of teachers who are pushing, and actually a lot of students too, are wanting financial literacy to be like a core graduation requirement in schools. Because, sitting down reading Shakespearean poetry is nice and all, but it's not going to put food on your table.
So I have a question or a topic that maybe is too controversial, but I'm curious what your perspective is on it. And that is immigration. And I feel like there is so many angles to it. And I think even my own perspectives have really shifted over the years. But yeah, I don't know. I'm just curious. Like, obviously, immigration is part of human existence, right? People have always migrated. But then at the same time, there has to be some type of balance to it. So even if you look at like Norway and Sweden right now, Sweden let in everybody, and now they're having huge crime issues. And then Norway focused on letting people in, but in a way that they're integrated, they're supported, they're able to function in the society given jobs. So they're doing it in kind of a slower process and seeing way better results. And even in Hawaii here, like there's, the debate with like the Micronesians and what the US did to, all the nuclear
Bikini
weapons.
Atoll.
Yeah. But then like, is it the fault of the Hawaiians that the US bombed that? Should they then carry a burden of, integrating them into their society? So I don't know. I'm just curious.
Well, that's similar to like the continental US sending their houseless communities here because you can sleep outside in Hawaii and survive. You can't sleep outside in New York and survive. So that was a huge dirty secret for a lot of the other states is just buying their homeless communities one-way tickets here.
Right.
As if we didn't have enough of our own houseless population to figure out how to support.
Right.
Well, that's why education is critical. That's why education really needs to be considered a frontline situation. Because whether you are indigenous or whether you are aboriginal or immigrant, all those kids are learning in the same space. And so it really, the relationship building really starts at a young age. You know, we don't, all of our friends, we can have this conversation about the Haole Hawaiian dichotomy, but the reality is that we all have some aspect of Haole in us one way or the other, either through ingestion, or, you know, assimilation, whatever it is. You can quote me on this, okay? You can quote me on this. Hooking up with Haules is not about diluting the Hawaiian blood. It's about indigenizing the Haole. Because if you people are going to be here anyways, you might as well give them a function. And the most primal function of any human being is to reproduce. I never know what's going to be that kind of podcast. Yeah, so I think that, well, I think when we talk about Haole, we have to really focus on the mindset, the foreign mindset. Not saying that Haole mindset and Haole mentality is not functional, because they came from someplace. All Haules are indigenous to somewhere. And I'm sure their mindset works wherever they came from.
So what is the Haole mindset?
I think the Haole mindset, for example, is just, it depends on where you are, right? If I go to America, I'm going to have a Haole mindset. I'm like, damn, this island is freaking huge. Right? So Haole mindset is a foreign mindset. It basically is the kind of mentality of just not knowing how a space, the nature of a space.
Can you be from a place and still have that mindset?
Of course. Of course. Yeah, but immigration is a really, you know, especially in this day and age, like our generation, man, we've seen some weird stuff with immigration, like
The Greys.
them. Okay, I don't think they were immigrating though,
Oh, just
because
visiting.
only a few of them came.
Really?
Yeah.
How do you know?
Well, that's the thing. Is like nobody really knows, right?
There's just supposedly a few.
Well, in that one Roswell crash, I think only a few survived.
Have you ever seen one?
Gray aliens.
I see. I see. The intergalactic immigration.
Right?
But did we immigrate here?
Guarantee.
another planet?
Guarantee. You
From
know?
where? Where do you think we came from?
I think there's a lot of theories. I think one way to really dive into it is by going into like the most ancient of texts. The most ancient of texts will talk about planetary systems.
What's the most ancient of texts?
You know, I would go into like the oldest text you can possibly go into in any given indigenous culture.